everyone, and welcome to the Mourning Coffee Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Carlock, and I am so excited about today's guest. Today, we are speaking with Colin Campbell, and I'm a big fan of his. He has a bunch of things that have gone on in his life as far as accomplishments. He is an Academy Award nominated filmmaker. He wrote an amazing book on grief called Finding the Words. He does a one-man show about grief that we're going to talk about today. So just really taking his loss and turning it into ways to help people and get the conversation around grief going. So I'm so grateful that he's here today on the podcast. So we are going to welcome Colin Campbell. Hi there, Colin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Brooke. Thank you for that introduction.
Of course. So I always start out asking, since it's the Mourning Coffee Podcast, what are you drinking this morning? I always have my protein coffee that I do every day.
Well, I don't know if this is sacrilege or not, but I'm drinking tea.
Oh, no, a tea drinker.
I'm a tea drinker. Is that terrible?
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, the audience is usually half and half, but I'm well known for despising tea, so yeah, I won't make fun of you too much, but definitely not a tea fan. But that's okay. You can still be on the show. So, Colin, I want to start off first just with a funny story about you, because I know you don't know me, but I know you. We were both speakers at the Compassionate Friends conference, and it was the first time I ever spoke there. And they scheduled my speaking thing at the exact same time as your keynote speech. So it was one of those, I had so many people stop by my room and say like, sorry, you want to hear this, but we have to go see Colin Campbell instead. And I was like, dang it, why would they do that?
It's terrible.
It's okay. Sorry. It's okay. No, and I heard, I didn't get to see you because I was speaking at the same time, but I heard it was fantastic. So I'm hoping I'll get to see that in the future. But for my audience that might not know you, can you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about your story and why you're so involved in the grief community?
Yeah. So my grief journey began June 12th, 2019. So 5.5 years ago now. My wife and I and our two children, Ruby and Hart, were driving to Joshua Tree. It's a little town about 2.5 hours east of Los Angeles. And it's a beautiful high desert town. We were going to go there, a little mini vacation, and a drunken high driver going 90 miles an hour slammed into us at full speed, never touched the brakes. It was a broadside hit, and Ruby and Hart in the back seat were killed. Ruby was 17 and Hart was 14. And ever since I've just been thinking about, writing about, talking about grief.
Yeah. So your book, Finding the Words, I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts, but I feel like kind of what got you into writing that book is such an interesting story. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book and kind of how you came up with the idea?
Yeah. Thank you. So I've been going to a number of grief groups, and I've read a lot of grief books. And I've heard this refrain from a lot of people saying that, you're going to find out who your true friends are now that you've lost your children, because most of your friends are going to abandon you. That was a message that Gail and I were getting over and over again. And I thought, my friends love me. They love Ruby and Hart.
Yeah.
How am I going to lose them? And yet I saw already like the seeds of possibility, because people were starting to drift away out of fear of hurting me, out of fear of hurting me and Gail, because people generally don't know how to talk to people in grief. We're told through the media basically that grieving people should be left alone. They don't want to be reminded of their loss. And so people were doing that. My dear friends were doing that. And I just realized I needed to talk about my grief. I needed to talk about Ruby and Hart to these people. And I started reaching out, and I did this thing I call it my grief spiel, where I would tell people what I need, like really clearly, like this is how it's going to go. You're going to talk about Ruby and Hart. You're going to name them.
I love that.
Talk about your kids also. We can talk about other things, but then we're going to circle right back to my grief after about like 4 or 5 minutes, because that's all I need to talk about right now. And my grief spiel got more and more elaborate as I sort of learned more about what I needed in the moment. And also it changed because my needs evolved, and I became less needy in a sense as grief became less acute.
Yeah.
And what I loved about my grief spiel was that it was received so positively. All these friends of mine, they were desperate to help, but they had no idea. And so when I told them what I needed, they were like, "Oh, thank you for telling me. I had no idea." And so I thought I have something to offer the grieving community because so many people were struggling with loneliness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So, and I heard you say on an interview that so many people, and I had the same experience, which is why when I heard it, I was like, yes, so many people were saying, I don't have the words. I don't have the words.
Yes.
Like, and really, like, yeah, I feel like we're so grief illiterate in this country. No one, and it is such a huge thing to lose a child or lose anyone that's so important to you that people really don't know what to say. So, I just don't have the words is kind of the default. But
yeah,
I heard there was a certain person that kind of changed that for you, and you were like, yes, this person gets it. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's a sweet story. It was very early on, but already, like, after day 3, I was already being bombarded with "there are no words," like over and over again. It was crazy how many people said it. Like almost everybody said this to me. And then this 14-year-old boy was friends with my son Hart. He wrote us an email, and he just said, Hart was so funny and kind and sweet and hilarious, and I love him, and I'll think about him, and I'll miss him every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, right. That's what we want to hear. These are the words we want to hear.
Yes.
And that was like a light bulb going off of, like, there are words. Of course there are words. The words they're not words to try and fix my loss. That's what people are confused about, I think.
Right.
Like, what do I say that's gonna fix him or help him? It's like, we don't need that. You don't need to offer me comfort. I just need to be in pain. But sharing a story about my children, or telling me you love me or you love them, even better.
Yeah.
That means the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like the further out that you get from the loss, you need to hear that even more almost. It's like people are like, oh, it's been so long. Should I bring it up again? I'm not sure. Is it just going to make them sad? But no, it's like, no, every time someone brings up my daughter's name, I'm like, yes, because we don't want our children to be forgotten. We love hearing about them. I tell people that all the time, like, give me all of the stories. I want all of the stories that you have, because every time I hear a new one, it's just a little piece of her, that I didn't get the chance to have. And I love it. I'm going to throw a comment up. So this is a live show. As you know, we have some people that comment and ask questions and things. So Rachel says, so true. I absolutely love talking about my son. It just warms my heart, which makes me think I need to connect more with people that truly understand what it is to walk through this. Yes, Rachel, definitely. And I feel like unless something like this has happened to you, you really don't get it. You might think you could imagine what it would be like, but until it actually happens, I don't know. Is that your experience, Colin?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's a special bond we share with other people who've had profound loss of any kind. That they get that the loss doesn't go away. We don't get over it.
Right.
We grieve for the rest of our lives because we still love them. So we grieve for them. Like, how could we not? And I think a lot about these movies or TV shows that show tough people, like really like super serious macho people, and then they lose a child and, like, don't say their name. Don't dare talk about them to me. It's like, what are you talking about? Who does that? Like, it's so false. It's crazy. I've talked to hundreds of people who've lost children. None of them say that. It's crazy. But in the movies, they always say it. In the movies, nobody wants to talk about their dead kid. It's really weird.
That is very true. So I know, do you live in LA? Is that?
I do, yes.
Yeah. So I know you've gone through so much with the wildfires, and I want to hear more about your show. So you you wrote a show and you perform it yourself, right? It's a one-man show called
Yes,
Grief, a one-man shit show. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so can you tell me about this? And I think you're pulling it out of retirement again, I guess, because of the LA wildfires and the just horrible devastation out there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote this one-man show very early on in grief. So it was finished by about 6 months after the car crash. And it's this very raw, but very funny, I think it's very funny, show about grief and grieving. And in it, I sort of allow myself, my character, to say all the kind of terrible thoughts that people often have in grief, which is about comparison. Like we compare our grief to other people's grief.
Yep.
And our grief always comes up on top, right? We're the ones who are suffering the worst loss imaginable, and everybody else doesn't get it. And so I do all that. I do all that like really dark comparison of different kind of grief, and then I turn a corner and I realize, of course, that's not true. It doesn't help to compare grief, and grief is grief, and loss is loss. And I arrive at a place of, I think, of grace in the show, where I just want to honor everybody's loss. But what I like about the show is that it goes to places that I've never heard anyone else talk about, because it's so ugly, it's so dark. And hopefully, I think it's also got a lot of comedy in it, a lot of humor in the show. And yeah, so actually, I was going to perform it. I'm performing it at Campbell Hall, which is Hart's old school.
Oh, that's great.
And they invited me long before the fires. They invited me. They just, the head of programming for the theater called me up and said, we'd love to have you present your show to the school, at the school theater, to the general community. And I said, oh, that's great. Do you know the content of my show?
Yeah.
It's pretty adult. She's like, oh, okay, ha, ha, ha. And I sent her a video. She's like, oh, my.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you weren't kidding. Oh, okay. Because I talk about sex, which again is another taboo. Grief and sex. This is a topic that people don't want to talk about. It's so uncomfortable, but it's part of being human. And how do we come back to how do we return to sex after suffering a terrible loss? And it's not easy.
No.
It's complicated.
Oh, that's such a great point. So, and you're right. It's something that people do not talk about. At all. Really. At all.
So when the fires happened, then we decided, well, let's make it a fundraiser now, because it was always scheduled for February 1st. So let's make it a fundraiser for the Red Cross to help. That's beautiful. Were you affected at all by the fires, or? I have friends and friends of friends who lost their homes. But me personally, no. It was very strange. I live in Silver Lake, not that far from the Eaton fire. And I saw huge plumes of smoke the first day or two, but then we had beautiful weather here. It was very surreal. There's raging fires all around us, but we're in a pocket of sunshine and clear air, and it was very surreal. Yeah, I know it was hard for me to watch. I actually talked about this in a video, and I was my last interview was with Lisa Kiefhofer, and we were talking about how, as grievers, it's, even though I'm on the opposite side of the country, it's so difficult to watch what's going on, because I think after a deep loss, like, you're so empathetic for people. I was seeing the video clips of like families who had lost their loved one's ashes, or like, someone who had passed away and then like their belongings are now gone. And it's just like, oh, your heart just absolutely breaks for those people, because we know what that's like. And just an awful situation. But that's really, really amazing of you to make it into a fundraiser. So I'm curious how the audience at a school is going to be. I think it's going to be mostly adults. I think they got the message. I don't think no little children are coming to see my show. All right, that's good. That's good. But I love the fact that you use humor, because that's one of my things, like in my book. And it's funny because when I
I haven't got a lot of negative reviews on my book, but I was actually just reading one that was like a 3-star review. And one of the comments was, one, there's too much cussing. And in my view, like after losing a child, there's no such thing as too much cussing. And and two, like there's a lot of humor in the book, and there are definitely people that are like, how could you be laughing? And it's like humor has really kind of helped me survive this journey. So I don't know, I appreciate other people that kind of look at it that same way. Like it's not, sacrilegious to laugh after you've lost someone.
Yeah, it's strange. I do know people who struggled to laugh for a long time, but Gail and I, we were telling jokes just days after, dark jokes, and they were bitter and hard, and we were crying and laughing, but it was part of our family. Ruby and Hart were funny people. They loved good jokes and inappropriate jokes. They're teenagers. Ruby was 17, Hart was 14. So yeah, we laughed a lot as a family. So it feels like we're honoring them if we're, I don't know.
I love that. So just kind of talking, so we learned a little bit about you. Just for people in the audience and people who are grieving, I just want to kind of go through some kind of general questions about your own experience and how you deal with things and things that you recommend for other people. Yeah. So you talk a lot about asking for support, and the whole idea with finding the words, like what do you say, to someone who's grieving, and it can feel impossible at times. So what would you say to someone who doesn't know how to start that conversation? What was it that you wanted or asked for when you were grieving?
Yeah. Well, I think a common misconception is, I sort of touched on already, the idea of trying to offer comfort. Anytime someone tries to offer comfort to a griever, they're inevitably going to minimize the pain. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened, but at least you got 10 years, or but at least you got to see them die, or but at least you have other kids, or but at least whatever, any kind of but at least. Don't say that.
No. Yeah.
Because and your job is not to try and make us feel better. Your job is to sit with us in our pain and be open to it, and to talk to us about. I mean, if the gold standard is if you knew the person who died, and as you said, if you could tell a story. If you could tell a story about the person who died to someone who's mourning them, that is amazing, because that's an incredible gift you can give to us. Something we didn't know about, new story. They're so precious to us. But short of that, just really just being present and asking us, allowing us, inviting us to share about our pain, not in a nosy way, like, oh, how did they die? Right? We don't need those conversations, but how did they live? How about that? That's just how they lived.
That's great.
That would be great to talk about.
And I'm just thinking, because, Ruby and Hart were teenagers. Libby was 10, so she was a little bit younger, but I mean, I'm assuming with 2 teenagers in the house, your life revolves pretty much around them. I know my life, I have 2 other children as well who were, older, who were teenagers when Libby died.
Oh, wow.
But most of the things that I did were with Libby. She was a competitive dancer. So, I was driving her everywhere, and, she was like my little barnacle attached to my hip all the time. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like, and kind of the secondary loss of losing everything that you do on a normal daily basis? Because we kind of have the same experience there, where it was like, oh my God, like, what the hell do I do with myself now?
Absolutely. Losing children who are still living in the home is very different, I think, than losing an adult child, because you're still actively parenting them, in the sense that, like you said, you're driving them places every day. You're getting to school, you're helping with homework, you're driving them to hang out with friends or to go to the movies, whatever it is. You're constantly involved, and then suddenly they're gone. And I think it hits you extra hard, that sense of meaninglessness and purposelessness. And that was something that I really struggle with. Like, what am I doing? Why am I alive without my kids? And I think for me, that's been a big, important component of my grieving journey, is proactively going out there into the world, into life, and looking for meaning and purpose. Aggressively even if I don't feel like it, doing something that I think could lead to a feeling of purposefulness, even though it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it right now. And it has paid off, that sense. So part of why I wrote the book is also for myself to have a reason to live. And I'm writing this book to share with other people, to help other people. And I
Right.
read this book by Viktor Frankl, and he's this amazing survivor of the Holocaust. And he wrote the idea that we find purpose in other people. We can't find it within ourselves. And I thought that was such a beautiful and true statement, that if I'm just trying to satisfy my own needs, I'm not going to feel that sense of purpose. But helping other people, being of service of any kind, is really helpful.
Yeah. I talk about that all the time because it's, I didn't do any of the speaking. I hadn't written a book. I've always wanted to write a book, but until Libby died, I never felt like I really had a purpose for writing a book or something that I cared enough to actually write about. So I get a lot of people, two different reactions, which I imagine you can let me know if you've had the same experiences. I sometimes get the, I don't know how you do that. I could never do that. I could never be on camera making videos or whatever, like talking about losing my child, like it's a negative thing. And then I get the people who are like, I wish I could do, what you're doing. And it's just, for me, same thing. It was like a matter of survival. It was just writing my book was as therapeutic for me as I hope it is for other people who read it, and it is the finding the sense of purpose and hearing from other people that what I'm doing helps them is honestly what keeps me going. It's why I do what I do, because it can, I heard you say once in an interview, I think, like, your life just feels completely meaningless after, you lose a child, and it's a way to find that meaning again. Is that the experience that you had?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And it was interesting. So Ruby and Hart were our only children, and we lost them all. And at first, I was confused when I met other parents who, like yourself, who had other living children who lost just one child, and it's because it was an early grief, and my mind was just, gone. But I was just like, "What are you so sad about? I would love to have Ruby or Hart alive."
Right.
Like I literally couldn't understand. It's so crazy, right? What do you mean lose this? But now I understand that, like, you lose say you have 10 children, you lose one child and everything, you lose everything. You lose, you're just as full of despair as I am. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that there are other people, that I have a wife, right? I have family, I have brother and sister. They don't matter in that intense period of grief, especially. It's when suddenly somebody's taken away from you, it feels like they're the only person that matters.
Yeah. I had a little extra, I don't know how to word it, but my teenage son was driving the car when my daughter died.
Oh, wow.
So it was that added element of he had pulled out at an intersection in front of a truck, and the truck hit Libby's side of the car. So then dealing with that on top of, so it wasn't, it was an interesting, twist on the surviving children also having to help him, through that. And my other son was supposed to be in the car, but took an extra shift at work and wasn't. So then he has the survivor's guilt. I should have been in the seat where Libby was killed. Wow. So while it might, I can see where, because we do always compare, I can see why people would compare and be like, well, at least you still have children, but added a whole level of putting off, I think, a little bit of my grieving to make sure that they survived and they were okay, mentally as well. So yeah. You talk a lot in the book about active mourning. Can you kind of break that down for us and tell us what that is or what it means to you?
Yeah. I feel like when I think about, especially the early days of grief, but even now, my worst days are when I'm just lying in bed and I just feel like I can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I just sit and I just feel like this oppressive weight of grief just kind of crushing me. And I know that there's some people out there who are like, if you need a day off, if you need a you day, you know, to whatever, take a me day,
Right.
just lie in bed all day, go for it. And I would say, don't, don't lie in bed all day, because I personally have found, and this is just my experience, but
Yeah.
that when I can do something with my grief, literally anything, like I could, if I take a walk and think about Ruby and Hart, that feels so much more empowering than just lying in bed and being crushed by it. But even better if I can take an action, if I can talk with a friend, if I could light a candle, if I can visit the grave, if I can write about my grief, if I can perform a one-man show about grief. But even this Hart gave me this cup.
Oh.
So I'm drinking out of the cup that Hart gave me.
Yeah.
And so it can be a very small thing, but just taking action, almost any action in grief, I feel like is a way of moving through grief and cutting grief down to size.
Yeah.
For me, when grief becomes so big and amorphous that I just feel despair, I'm just lost in grief, right? But if I can sort of parse it out, and I'm doing this right now, I'm going to write about Ruby and Hart right now, that helps me. So that's my sense of what's being active. And the other part about active that I think about is a lot of times my first reaction will be like, I don't want to go and see a friend of Ruby or Hart's. I don't want to go to our favorite park, or a restaurant. Or just yesterday, we're fostering to adopt 2 teenagers.
Oh, that's great.
And we took them yesterday to an amusement park out here in Los Angeles, Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And Ruby loved Universal Studios, and she loved Harry Potter World in particular. And we went on the Harry Potter ride that she loved so much. And, you know, at one point, Gail just burst into tears. And it's painful. It's hard. It's hard to do these things. But then after she cried, she, you know, I can't say she felt better, but she felt a connection to Ruby. She felt, you know, she felt alive. She felt like she was honoring her grief, and that helped her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that so much. Well, and it's so true, because the more you try to push it away and not think about it and not embrace the things that pop up, you know, those grief waves or tsunamis or whatever you want to call them, they just wait for you later and then hit you harder later. So yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, there are times where I lay on my couch and I'm sad, but I'm kind of the same way as you, I think, where I need to be up and doing things and being active just in general, but then also in my grief. So that's where I guess things, you know, like making the Instagram posts about your kids or what you're going through or whatever, and making the videos and doing the writing and speaking about them and that kind of thing. That's kind of how I process, but it doesn't have to be that for everyone. So, you know, just the ways that you mentioned, like the smaller things, like the coffee cup is amazing, you know, and a lot of people would put that cup away because it makes them sad.
Right. And it does make me sad. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but then it helps. It makes me actually less sad. You know, my wife burst into tears, but then she felt a little better. I felt a little stronger.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. You got to grieve.
Yeah. And it's not like desensitizing, it's more embracing. It's just learning that your grief is going to be there. You're never not going to have lost your kids. You know, it's going to be right next to you all the time. So you might as well embrace it. And I think it does get a little bit easier the more you learn to let it in your life and live with it than it does trying not to think about it and trying to avoid it.
Yeah, it becomes a lot less scary. I was very scared. I was very, very scared of my grief. I was scared that I would just fall into a hole and I'd never come back.
Yeah, agreed. So one of the other things that you talk about a lot is like the idea of rituals and community. Can you talk a little bit about anything that's helped you as far as that goes, or what you recommend for other people?
Yeah. Yeah. So a big part of my personal education about grief and grieving came to me from the Jewish faith, or the Jewish practices. So I'm
Mhm.
not Jewish. I'm an atheist.
Me too.
Um, oh, nice.
Right. I'm going to say that because we don't meet each other very often in the grief
Right.
world. I feel like it
Right.
is, yeah. The other comments I get in my book reviews is that there's no God. Like, what? There's no, like, if you're looking for religious stuff, this is not it. And that's true. But I feel like I appreciate you because I feel like there's not a lot of that out there. And I know when I was grieving, I was looking for that and I couldn't find it. So it's part of what I do, why I do what I do. So fellow free thinker, I appreciate. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was my little tangent, but yes, Jewish community rituals.
Yes, my wife is Jewish, and we
Okay.
raised Ruby and Hart as Jews, and we're an active member of our synagogue, and it's important to me, that connection to that community. It's always been important to me. But then in grief, I really was lost. The one downside of being an atheist was that I had no family rituals. I had no cultural practices to fall back on in grieving. None, zero. And so I just I did whatever the rabbi said. That was what I was like, whatever you say, I'm going to do that. All out, the whole thing, whatever it is. And they were all amazing. They were all so helpful to me, so clarifying. And one of the big focuses is about community.
Yeah.
We grieve in community. And so for the Jewish tradition, you sit Shiva for 7 nights after the funeral. And that means your community comes to your house and sits with you all evening, again and again and again, not just like one day. It's not just awake.
Right.
It's a whole week. And in that, we started talking to people about Ruby and Hart, about our grief. They started telling stories about Ruby and Hart, and it was this amazing community. And another ritual they have is that they mark the end of Shloshim. Shloshim is the first 30 days after the funeral.
Okay.
And you have to mark it with some kind of a ritual, some kind of a ceremony, but they don't tell you what it is. You have to make it up yourself. So Shiva is very prescribed. It's very clear what you're supposed to do, but the end of Shloshim, you do something. And that was kind of great gift for us, because then we were like, well, what do we want to do? What's the ritual that's going to mean something to us and to Ruby and Hart? And we gathered at a park that we all loved as a family, the Los Angeles Arboretum. We got 2 trees with plaques on them with their names, and they're amazing trees. They actually looks like they're hugging each other. It's really really incredible. Like genuinely, like you'll go there and you cannot tell where one tree ends and the other begins. Like literally, nobody can. It takes you like 5 minutes of searching. Like, wait, oh, I see. It looks like they're like fused. It's really beautiful.
That is beautiful.
We gathered a bunch of people there, and we told Ruby and Hart stories, and we cried, and somebody sang a song, and a rabbi came, and we also just sat in silence and just listened. It was very beautiful. And I sort of got hooked. I was like, okay, right. We were allowed to create our own rituals, so I'm going to keep doing that. And we did. We kept creating these rituals where we gather people together. And one of the ones that's my favorite, which is one of the hardest days for me, is my birthday. I don't want to celebrate anything.
Right. Yeah.
And my birthday was always what I thought was a really fun day. We'd all gather at the beach, and we'd invite my friends and Ruby and Hart's friends and Gail's friends. We had a big gathering of people at the beach, and I would get them all sandwiches. And we'd at one point jump in the ocean, and we'd, play dodgeball. And after Ruby and Hart were killed, it was like, well, now what do I do? My birthday is coming up, and that's the last thing I want to do, right? But then I thought, no, I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to do it again. We're going to have my birthday the same as we always did, but this time it's going to be a memorial for Ruby and Hart. So not a birthday, just a memorial.
Yeah, that's great.
And we all gathered, and we spelled their names out in rocks. We all jumped in the ocean and said, Ruby and Hart jumped in the ocean. And so I've done that every year now. Since then, I've kept that tradition up, and that's really meaningful to me, because in this day that's so hard, I'm surrounded by people who love me and Ruby and Hart.
Yeah,
and it helps me.
That's great. Do you have any particular things that you do, like on their birthdays or the anniversary of their death or anything like that?
Yeah, the anniversary of death is always a hard one, right? Because like, what do you
Yes.
do with that? It's not like, what are you going to celebrate? You're not
Right. You don't
celebrating.
celebrate. Yep.
What are we doing with that? But we do something. We always do things, some kind of a get together or a gathering. And same for the birthdays. So one year we gathered in a park and lit candles. Another year was during lockdown, and we couldn't gather people, but we had them all write letters to Ruby and Hart, birthday letters to
Oh,
Ruby and
that's
Hart.
great.
And we took them out to the desert near where they were killed. We have a house out there. That's why we were going out there. And we read these letters out loud to the beautiful rocks. And that was hard. That took a long time to read all those letters.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't do it emotionally, only a couple letters at a time. But that helped us. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Libby's death anniversary is coming up on February 9th, so it's pretty close. You always get that, like, you can just feel it coming. Her brothers and dad and I paint rocks with little hopeful messages, and then we go hide them on trails around our area so that people can find them. So it's just, she loved to hike, so then we she loved it when we would find rocks that other people have left, so yeah, it's just one of our ways of just kind of remembering and honoring her and passing those good vibes forward. And I think those kind of things are so important. Like you said, so many people just want to dive under the covers that day. I just don't want to see anyone. I don't want to do anything. And if that helps you, okay. But I feel like it's so much nicer just to do something in their honor and remember them boldly. I feel like that's helped me much more. So
yeah, boldly. I love that. Well, I want to ask about those rocks. What do you write on the rocks? Do you write her name? Do you write Libby?
So we put usually we just paint things that Libby loved. So for example, she was a dancer, so some I paint with little ballet shoes, and she was obsessed with Hamilton, so once I painted the little Hamilton logo, and just things that say like smile and you're awesome and things like that. So yeah, just a bowl of spaghetti because she was obsessed with noodles. And then on the back we have an organization called Live Like Libby, where we raise money to give scholarships to dance students who are in financial need. And so on the back we put Live Like Libby, and people can send in pictures of themselves when they find the rocks. And
oh my God.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like she'd get a kick out of that. I feel like she'd smile, and anytime I do anything that I feel, would make her proud, that makes me feel a little bit better. So that's why I do so much of the stuff I do. Just try to make her proud, because she was awesome. And I'm sure you feel the same way about Ruby and Hart.
Yeah. They also loved Hamilton, by the way. Yes, they knew all the songs by heart. And there was a summer where we just listened to Hamilton. That's it. All summer long.
Yep, she knew every single lyric to every single song, and it's one of my things that I don't know if you have anything like this. Normally, I tell people embrace it. That's the one thing I still struggle with, because I had gotten her tickets to go see Hamilton on Broadway for Christmas, and then she died 2 weeks before we were supposed to go to the show. So it was like the thing that we were both so excited about that we never got to do. So it's still one of those, like, it's getting better, but for the longest time that was like anything Hamilton was dagger to the heart.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
yeah, that will be a lot of tears when you see Hamilton.
Yes. Yep. Haven't been able to do that yet, but maybe someday. We will see. So you do a lot of creative things, I know, like with the writing and the play and all that. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit? Has creativity, how has that helped your grief journey?
Yeah, I think it's helped a lot. I think on the one hand, writing is just helpful because it's me literally processing what's happening. I think it's so hard. It's such a unfathomable thing to lose a person that you love. It goes against everything. We're not supposed to lose the people we love, especially not children. And there's just a lot to process. And just writing about it has helped me immensely. But I think the creative spark, the creative the act of creation is against death, right? We're doing something. We're creating. We created children, and now we're creating art. It's like I think in a way it's a allows us to fight against death in a sense. And that's helpful. Yeah.
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 With all the different things that you've done, do you ever, and this is personal, I'm just bringing this up because this is sometimes something that happens to me. Do you ever deal with the guilt that you are now, like for me, it's, I always wanted to be an author, but now that Libby has died, now I'm an author and now I get to travel and speak. And now, I get to do that stuff. And it's all stuff I would have loved to do before. But like I said, I didn't really have the chance because I was a full-time teacher and a mom.
Right.
And now it's like, sometimes I get hit with that guilt of like, oh, the only reason I have any of this now is because I lost Libby. Do you ever feel that sense? I know, and you tell yourself that's dumb, like stop, but it sneaks in there sometimes. I don't know if you ever feel the same way.
No, I'm laughing because it's like do I ever feel guilty? I feel guilty all the time.
Yeah.
Do I ever feel guilty? All the time. I'm guilty that I'm alive, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big struggle. I talk about it in my show about guilt. Yeah, it's anytime something good is happening, something new is happening, it's very hard. It's like they aren't here for this. Oh, they aren't here for this.
Yeah.
And so it happens all the time. And yeah, I did always want to be an author, but I didn't want to be an author of a grief book. That's not what that was.
Exactly.
I never imagined writing that. No. But yeah, and then my next thought is, oh, they'd be so proud and they would love this, but it doesn't change the fact that it still hurts.
Yeah,
it still hurts, and it's really complicated because, like I said, we're fostering actually to adopt these two teenagers.
Oh my gosh!
And our son is 15 and our daughter's about to turn 14. So now it's been 2 years now, so they're getting closer to Ruby and Hart's age as well. I mean, he's already older than Hart ever was.
Yeah.
And when we have a good day, it's wonderful, and then it's also terrible. And I've come to a certain kind of a peace with guilt, in a similar way that I've come to a peace with grief. Like, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's not going to go away. I'm going to miss them for the rest of my life, and I'm going to feel guilt about living without them. And so I think that's helped me a little bit to just accept it. Yeah. Just learn to live with it. It's just there. It's like, yep, oh, there's guilt. Yep, sure enough. Yep. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that situation is it's a double-edged sword, I'm sure. But you're doing something that's fantastic and amazing and helping two beautiful kids, and it's honoring the kids that you lost. But yeah, I can imagine it is still like like there are still things that definitely, I think that's the hard truth of grief. It never really goes away because there's always something that will trigger it. And it is, like you said, just learning to live with it and deal with it and make peace that this is how it is. And I feel like the more you can do that, kind of the easier it gets, but I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, it coexists. It's like the pain and the purpose coexist,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So for people who want to help other people, because we're running out of time here, but so much of what you say in a message that I love of yours is what people should do for other people. So I know we talked about just talking about the person that, someone else lost. So is there anything else that you would recommend? And is there anything else that you would tell someone to avoid?
Yeah. Well, things that I haven't touched on yet. Because avoid trying to give them comfort.
Yeah.
Avoid trying to fix their loss.
Did you find like practical things? I know I felt like after my loss, people not asking me what I needed, but just doing shit for me. Like just like, okay, I'm bringing you dinner. Here it is. Like not asking me about it, just doing it. I had someone mow my lawn one day, and that was like the greatest, it was like that. That was one of the most helpful things, because who in the hell feels like mowing your lawn after you just lost your child, So I don't know. Is it things like that? Did you have things like that happen that you found helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a meal chain was set up for us by actually it was a combination of our synagogue and Hart school. Those two communities came together and did a meal train, and it was very sweet. People complained. They said like it got booked up immediately. Like, there was too many people giving us food, and it was that was amazing. That I didn't even know that existed, and that was just like wow. Just food was there every day. People were desperate to give us food. I mean, this funny story was that the bagels showed up at our doorstep, but like a lot. Like dozens of bagels every morning, dozens of bagels. And it's like, there's just two of us here.
You're right. Yeah.
And we're grieving. We're not really even very hungry. Like I love bagels, but like, what do we do with then we feel guilty. Like, what are we doing with all these bagels? Like there's dozens of bagels every day. Like we got to take them out to the homeless shelter now. Like it was like an obligation. And so we told people there's too many bagels, and the word got out. No bagels. Don't give them any bagels. And I was like, no, I just want two. So I'd open the door like, oh, there's no bagels now. Shit. Just wanted two bagels.
I love it, because that's one of the things, like in the moment, it's like, oh my God. And then later it's hysterical. Like, yeah. For me, it was like the freezer's full of lasagna. Like I could not fit any more casseroles in my freezer. It's like, I appreciate it, but I'm out of room.
Yeah. But a couple of things not to do, I remember from earlier that was really challenging for me, was when people would bring up their losses as a way to sort of relate to me. And it makes sense. It's like, oh, this person's sad. They lost their children. I lost a cousin 10 years ago. And so they'll tell me that, oh, I had a cousin died 10 years ago. And it's like, okay, what? I'm supposed to talk about your cousin now? Like,
right.
No. Yeah. Are you saying your cousin's the same as my two children? Like it was all like bad.
Yep.
So that my advice would be, don't bring up your own loss, especially to somebody in acute grief in early days, because they don't have bandwidth for anybody else's pain. They're just they just have to be about themselves. They're struggling. They're like, their identity has crumbled, and they need some help. So don't talk about your other deaths that you've had.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And then crying. So this is interesting. People wouldn't want to cry near us. I think again they would think that it would trigger us, and we would cry, which is probably true. We probably would cry if you're crying next to us. So what would happen was they would talk to us really happy, and they'd sneak off to the bathroom and start crying, and I could hear them. Just like, I hear you crying in the bathroom, and you're so chipper talking to me, but both feel weird.
Right.
Can you be less chipper talking to me, and then can you also cry with me?
Yes.
So I just think like that honesty, not trying to protect me from any of that.
Yeah.
They were putting on a really happy face to protect me. But it felt kind of jarring. Like, why are you so happy?
I guess. That's very true. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Yeah. All right. Well, Colin, we are almost out of time here, but I want to make sure that people know where to find you and find your book. And are tickets still available for your show? When is that?
They are. It's February 1st. Okay. The school's called the Campbell Hall School. So if you Google Campbell Hall School in North Hollywood, on the website, you have to somewhere on the website. There's tickets available. And you can find me, you can get my book, Find the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. That's the best thing to give people who are grieving. My book and your book, our books.
Our books. All right.
The best thing you can give somebody. But and then I'm on Instagram at Colin Campbell Writer.
Okay.
And I'm on the internet at colincampbellauthor.com is my website.
Okay. All right. And when I repost this on YouTube, I will put links to all of those in the description. Or if anyone is listening to the podcast, you can go to the description of the podcast and you will find all of that information, and everywhere that you can find Colin there in the description as well. Colin, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I feel like we could talk for another hour. I really appreciate you joining me, and good luck with your show. I hope it goes really well for you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
All right. I will see you guys next time, and have a great week.